Let's start with the environment, the protection of the environment. It's a question of how much of that should be done by the state, how much of it should be done locally. But clearly, if there are new challenges to the nation, the question of access to funds on the international markets matters a lot. Is it easy to get or not? Is it going to be funded internally? In any area, just as with a family, when you have big expenditures like a house, where you put a lot of money up front and you may be paying over time. Well, in a country you have the same things: the development of a road system, dams, electricity system, ports. Part of what makes a nation is connectivity. You may need media, radio stations. You don't have to run them, and you probably shouldn't be running them as a state. But there are countries that have significant state funding, like the BBC in the UK, for example. There may be funding of media for external purposes, France 24. So you can go around the different sectors and you can see there is a case for some state involvement as an investor to ensure the main institutions can perform, that the security and external relations can be undertaken. And then you start looking at how things are run. It's quite easy to imagine that the state might be involved in funding certain areas, but that doesn't mean it has to run these areas. But this is where you get into significant debates about where countries can be very different, where the funding in some countries for transport systems may be almost totally private in some form, and in others very significant state involvement. But let's be clear, in many countries that profess to be strongly market-oriented, they still have significant funding in everything from railway systems through to electrical systems. In some cases,
when you say funding, you mean like a subsidized system, or you mean like...
It may be investments, maybe ownership. Increasingly, I mean, the story of the 90s was ownership moving from state areas to private. I think Telefónica del Peru is an example of that. I think it's also true that the experience of doing that in some countries has not been very successful. The UK is an example where people argue that the quality of services in many areas has dropped, whether it's some of the regional water companies or whether it's the railway system. So it's not at all clear that liberalising basic services is as clever an idea as people argue it should be.
But you need a good regulation system, right? A strong, reliable regulation institution behind this process.
You need strong, independent arbiters of the system. That's quite complex when you're dealing with regional monopolies. There's a tendency for the public to be very critical of liberalised companies that don't serve them well. So they may have a romantic view of the services they received in the past, exaggerated. But without question, people can get quite angry about poor services from... in theory, when you release resources through liberalisation and get new funding in, that ideally those funds should be spent to develop the system, the economy further. But that's not always the case. I mean, in the UK, and I think in other parts of Europe, what we saw was quite a lot of that went in to fill the hole in the budgets, which were there for, not necessarily there for developing the infrastructure in the economy. These are big debates. It's not been easy for some of the companies. Airlines are a good example, where in many countries airlines were not profitable. They were prestige, were there for prestige purposes. And the competition amongst private airlines, certainly you've seen prices come down substantially. I personally would say in Europe as an example, but it's a very significant improvement. But
yeah, with this the cheaper airlines like
airlines,
EasyJet.
it gives access to much greater people, to much greater opportunity to fly, connect, and so on. I think cheap transportation is something that should be valued. Of course, it has other side effects, congestion in airports.
But they have built their own airports, right? If you fly with EasyJet, you don't fly from. I mean, you have these other airports.
I fly quite a bit from EasyJet. What they've done is, and this is true in the US, and I think in many areas, I'm sure it's true in Peru, is that there's been a rise of regional air carriers. You don't just go between the big cities, but you go to many of the smaller cities. And EasyJet and Ryanair and others have been very successful at that, and I think that's a value. Again, people are critical again to services, so, but by and large, you can travel to more places more cheaply, and I think assuming travel is good, it allows people to come together. Everything from personal meeting of loved ones and families through to meeting one's customers and so on.
Okay, great. Let's talk about a little bit about the institutions. You have come here invited by IPAE, is that right?
Organized by Foro, but yes, my presentation today was to IPAE.
Because they're launching this new initiative, right?
That's correct.
What's the nature of this new idea they have?
Well, my understanding is they want to really develop innovation within Peru and open up the opportunity to train people to bring innovation to companies and other institutions. And all of this is in part and parcel hopefully enabling these institutions to be more successful in their activities within Peru and competing outside of Peru.
So what are the key issues that you think they should approach for this to be successful?
I think the first one is, it sounds obvious, but is that they need to make sure that companies and others understand they exist. They should make quite sure that the services that they offer and the possibilities that they bring to companies are understood. I think there's a lot of, and I think they would agree there's a lot of work in doing that.
You mean publicity? Or?
It's partly publicity, but also it's partly building programs and then discussing them with companies. So I mean, I have not seen, but I'm not part of the discussion. I've not seen the programs that they've been laid out. But I believe this is something that's beginning, and that has to be done well. You need a few successful programs which you can then show other people how much you have to contribute.
And what sector would you say they should study more?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's quite a lot of discussion about the value of bringing these ideas to the mid-sized companies, those that have the potential to grow and have already understand well the nature of business and what it takes to succeed, and are looking to grow and develop further. But I think they've still got to do some of their own market review and market analysis.
So, but I mean, you will say it will be more interesting for them to focus on middle companies, not bigger and not.
Well, I think you could argue, I'm sure they would be looking at all companies. I mean, I think there's some quite vibrant middle-sized companies. And the middle-sized sector is quite large. Of course, the middle-sized sector may feel that it doesn't need external help. I don't know the Peruvian business environment.
There's going to be a summit, an event next year here in Peru for the whole Latin America, organized by World Economic Forum.
That's correct. The World Economic Forum, as you know, has regional events
yes.
every year.
Next year is happening here in Peru. What would you say? I mean, does that imply something for the country that is going to come, like people from around the world?
Well, many of the regional events of the World Economic Forum are dominated by people from the region, but there are others who come as well. So they come because they have activities here, or they establish activities here. I think this is a great opportunity to showcase Peru. Here you have a significant number of senior people, business people. I'm sure there will be some politicians, and there will be also thinkers and others. But this is an opportunity to showcase the successes of Peruvian business, to look at the challenges of Peru as a country, to examine, for example, the resource issues. Peru is an example, there are other examples on handling it. I think the fact that it's here, I don't know who in Peru is in discussion with the World Economic Forum, but it would be, I think, good advice to them to try to ensure that Peruvian examples are well placed within the program that the Forum develops.
Okay. And what other significant events do the World Economic Forum organize around the world? You have Davos, right?
Well, first of all, remind you again, I'm not working for the World Economic Forum at the moment.
Don't worry.
But having worked for them, there are a series of different activities. It's a membership organization, which the annual meeting is in Davos. They have a meeting for growth companies it's been in Dalian or Tianjin in China. So these are complementary. This is more to do with growth companies. Davos is more to do with large established companies. Then it has regional meetings around the world, of which the Latin American meeting is one. I think the last Latin American meeting recently was in Mexico. The Forum structures its members into something like 15 different business groups, industry groups, and each of those industry groups have their own activities. Certainly they will meet in Davos, but they will commission work, and they may meet in the mid-year, and they may do other things. So it's a group. Forum is something like a club for around 1,000 companies who arrange events.
And what is the objective of Davos?
It's an annual meeting, so around 1,000 or so, 1,200 people will come as members, and another 1,200 will be invited. One of the key purposes of a meeting like that is to understand what is the global agenda. So there's a large set of program elements which cover that, but it will do other things. It will look at personal issues, current issues. Something as simple as if I'm working 20 hours a day, how do I keep my marriage intact? Leaders to being middle-aged leaders and still happen to be leaders when they're older. So I think the answer is it's building a community, and at its best, it's identifying problem areas we would like to find solutions for. It's encouraging collaborative action to tackle problems. You can go on the website, you can see examples.
Yeah, I have covered everything that I needed, but maybe you want to add something for, this video is for the people in IPAE. They're going to show it in in classrooms, or maybe in their website. So maybe you want to...
Well, for me, it's been a privilege to come to Lima at the moment that this new initiative is being launched, to be part of this innovation initiative. What's important about innovation, I think, is that people have a desire to change something. They desire to learn more about the thing they want to know more about. Their subject matters. I think the combination of energy, human energy, intelligence, and hopefully an environment here in Peru that encourages opportunity will make Peru a stronger, vibrant, more interesting place to be.